The most dangerous assumptions are the ones made before a single question is asked. Morning settled gently over Maple Ridge, one of those quiet suburban neighborhoods where trimmed hedges, polished mailboxes, and waving American flags made every street look reassuringly familiar. The sun had only begun to warm the sidewalks, and the air still carried the cool calm that disappeared once the city fully woke. It was the kind of morning when nothing remarkable was supposed to happen. Officer Ethan Walker believed exactly that. His patrol SUV rolled slowly through the neighborhood as he glanced at the information glowing on the computer beside him. A dispatch note had come through only minutes earlier. Anonymous caller. Possible suspicious person. Residential address confirmed. No emergency reported. The complaint itself was vague. Someone had called because they claimed a woman had been lingering around one of the larger homes on the street. No mention of trespassing. No report of theft. No signs of violence. Just suspicion wrapped inside uncertainty. For Ethan, that was enough to investigate. He pulled to the curb and stepped out of the cruiser with the confidence of someone who had repeated the same routine hundreds of times before. Across the quiet front yard, a woman stood on the porch, unlocking her own front door after retrieving a package that rested beside the welcome mat. She wore a navy business suit beneath a light coat. A leather briefcase rested near her feet. Everything about her appearance suggested she was preparing for another ordinary workday. She looked up as the patrol car door closed. Their eyes met for only a moment. "Morning," she said politely. Ethan didn't return the greeting. Instead, he walked directly toward the porch. "I need to see your identification." The woman studied him without surprise. "May I ask why?" "We received a complaint." "What kind of complaint?" "I'll ask the questions." For several seconds, neither of them moved. The neighborhood remained strangely quiet. Somewhere farther down the street, a lawn sprinkler clicked rhythmically across fresh grass while birds disappeared into the tall oak trees lining the sidewalk. The woman folded her hands calmly in front of her. "My name is Monica Harris. I didn't ask for your name. I asked for your identification." She nodded once. "Officer, am I being detained?" "No." "Am I suspected of committing a crime?" "I'm conducting an investigation." She held his gaze. "Then help me understand what law requires me to identify myself while standing at my own front door." Ethan barely glanced toward the house behind her. His attention remained fixed on Monica herself. "The complaint says you don't belong here." She looked over one shoulder at the familiar brick home before returning her attention to him. "This is my residence. Do you have proof?" "I have every reason to believe I don't need to prove where I live simply because someone made an anonymous phone call." Ethan's expression hardened. People say that all the time. A curtain shifted inside a neighboring house. Across the street, a man slowed his morning walk after noticing the patrol car. Another neighbor paused while loading groceries into the trunk of her SUV. The quiet street had begun paying attention. Monica noticed the growing audience, but never acknowledged them. Instead, she spoke with the same measured tone. "Officer Walker." His eyes narrowed slightly. "I never introduced myself." "No," Monica answered gently. "Your name tag did." For the first time, Ethan seemed momentarily caught off guard. It lasted less than a second. "Driver's license." "I'd rather understand why you believe that's appropriate. You can either cooperate or make this more difficult." Monica looked at the unopened front door beside her, then back at Ethan. "There are moments," she said quietly, "when asking one more question protects everyone involved." He mistook the sentence for resistance. "I've already asked the question." She gave a small, almost sympathetic nod. "No," she replied. "You've only made an assumption." At that exact moment, the radio clipped to Ethan's shoulder crackled with the voice of dispatch. "Unit 12, dispatch has additional information regarding that address." Without taking his eyes off Monica, Ethan pressed the transmit button. "Go ahead." The dispatcher hesitated. For reasons she could not yet explain, something about the address on her screen suddenly no longer looked ordinary. Every investigation begins with facts. The wrong ones begin with certainty. The silence that followed dispatch's interruption seemed to stretch across the entire street. Officer Ethan Walker kept his eyes on Monica Harris as he pressed the transmit button on his shoulder microphone. "Go ahead." For a brief moment, only static answered. Then the dispatcher's voice returned, noticeably slower than before. "Unit 12, can you confirm the house number?" Ethan glanced toward the stone pillar beside the front steps. 4821. Another pause. "I copy." Nothing else came. Ethan frowned. Is there a problem? We're verifying some information. His expression hardened. Dispatch rarely hesitated. Either they had information or they didn't. I already have the subject in front of me. Monica remained exactly where she was. Her briefcase rested beside the front door. The morning breeze gently lifted a strand of her hair, but her expression never changed. She looked less like someone under investigation and more like someone waiting for a meeting that had been delayed. Across the street, another neighbor stepped outside after noticing the patrol vehicle. A young couple walking their dog slowed almost instinctively, exchanging curious glances before continuing at half their original pace. No one spoke. People simply watched. Ethan interpreted their attention as support. He looked back at Monica. This could be over in 30 seconds. So could a misunderstanding, she replied. You still haven't shown identification. You still haven't explained what crime you believe I've committed. I don't need probable cause to ask questions. No, Monica answered calmly. But you do need a reason to believe I don't belong at my own home. Ethan folded his arms. The caller reported a suspicious person. And that person is me. Apparently. She nodded thoughtfully, almost as if she were organizing facts rather than emotions. I wonder what looked suspicious. Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he studied the front porch. Everything appeared ordinary. Fresh flowers stood beside the entrance. A government courier envelope rested beneath the mailbox. The brass nameplate beside the door simply read, Harris. He barely noticed it. His attention remained fixed on the woman standing in front of him. The radio crackled again. Unit 12. Go ahead. This address is returning additional administrative notes. What kind of notes? We're still reviewing them. Ethan exhaled impatiently. Dispatch, it's a residence. I asked for information, not a research project. I understand. The dispatcher sounded uncomfortable. Please remain at the location. I wasn't planning to leave. Monica quietly observed the exchange. You might want to listen carefully, she said. I've heard enough. I'm not referring to me. Before Ethan could respond, another call appeared on dispatch's console hundreds of yards away. The screen displayed an internal routing code that Lisa Morgan had never seen connected to a neighborhood address before. She opened it. Her eyes narrowed. A second verification request automatically appeared. Then a third. Each carried the same instruction. Do not release address information without supervisor review. Lisa leaned forward. That had never happened during an ordinary patrol inquiry. She immediately reached for another phone. Back on Maple Ridge, Ethan remained unaware. He believed the hesitation inside dispatch simply reflected unnecessary bureaucracy. His confidence only grew stronger. Monica, meanwhile, glanced once at the unopened front door behind her before returning her attention to the officer. There is still time, she said quietly, to ask a different question. Ethan shook his head. I already know everything I need. Several miles away, Lisa Morgan's supervisor answered the secured line. She took one breath before speaking. I think we need a sergeant involved. Because whatever was attached to that address was no longer being treated as an ordinary police call. The moment someone stops listening is often the moment the truth begins speaking somewhere else. Officer Ethan Walker glanced at the gathering neighbors with quiet confidence. Their attention reassured him. In his mind, he was simply doing his job while everyone else watched a routine police encounter unfold. Only Monica Harris seemed completely unaffected. She stood beside her front door with the same composed expression she had worn from the beginning. Her briefcase remained untouched. She had not taken a single step toward the house or away from the officer. The morning felt strangely still. You've had plenty of opportunities to cooperate, Ethan said. And you've had the same number of opportunities to verify your assumptions, Monica answered. He shook his head. I don't need a lecture. It wasn't one. It sounded like one. She offered the faintest smile. It was advice. Ethan ignored it. Produce your identification. Monica folded her hands. Officer Walker, if you believe I've committed an offense, tell me what it is. I'm investigating suspicious activity. What activity? The complaint. The complaint describes a person. It describes you. It describes someone's opinion. Her calmness only seemed to increase his frustration. Some officers expected resistance. Others expected fear. Monica displayed neither. She simply waited. Across town, inside the communications center, dispatcher Lisa Morgan had already brought Sergeant Brian Collins to her workstation. You said this address triggered restricted administrative flags. Lisa nodded. I've never seen this combination before. Brian leaned toward the monitor. The screen displayed several protected notifications that automatically limited access to portions of the address file. Nothing explained why, only that additional authorization was required before releasing further information. Brian frowned. Who requested the original call? Anonymous. Any crime reported? No. Any victim? No. Any emergency? Lisa slowly shook her head. Brian immediately reached for another phone. Keep Unit 12 exactly where he is. Back on Maple Ridge, Ethan had no idea the conversation taking place several miles away. Instead, he stepped one pace closer to the porch. I'm giving you one last chance. Monica met his eyes. For what? To make this easier. She looked briefly toward the quiet neighborhood. Before answering, I already am. The statement confused him. You haven't done anything I've asked. I haven't done anything to escalate this either. The words lingered in the morning air. Several neighbors exchanged uncertain looks. What at first appeared to be a straightforward encounter now felt increasingly uncomfortable. Nobody heard shouting. Nobody saw aggression. Yet something about the exchange felt completely out of balance. Ethan reached toward the radio on his shoulder once again. Dispatch. Lisa answered immediately. Go ahead, Unit 12. Status. There was another noticeable pause. Then she spoke carefully. Supervisor has been notified. Ethan frowned. For what? We've requested additional review. I don't need a supervisor. That decision has already been made. His jaw tightened. I'm handling this. We understand. Her voice remained professional. Please remain at your current location. The transmission ended. Ethan stared at the silent radio for a moment before clipping it back onto his shoulder. Monica watched without saying a word. Then, almost gently, she broke the silence. Sometimes, she said, the first person to question an investigation isn't the subject. He looked at her impatiently. It's the investigator. Before Ethan could respond, another patrol vehicle quietly turned onto Maple Ridge Drive. Sergeant Brian Collins had decided he wanted to see the address for himself. Authority is never tested when everyone agrees with you. It is tested when the facts begin disagreeing. Sergeant Brian Collins pulled his patrol SUV quietly behind Ethan Walker's cruiser. He stepped out without urgency, his eyes first scanning the peaceful neighborhood before settling on the woman standing calmly at the front door. Nothing about the scene suggested danger. No raised voices. No struggle. No frightened witnesses. Only an officer, a homeowner, and a street that had become unusually attentive. Brian approached with measured steps. Morning. Monica acknowledged him with a polite nod. Sergeant. Ethan turned immediately. Glad you're here. Brian looked between them. What do we have? Anonymous complaint. Suspicious person. Refusing to identify herself. Brian shifted his attention toward Monica. Ma'am, have you been advised why you're being contacted today? I've been told someone believes I don't belong at my own home. Her answer was calm, matter of fact, almost detached. Brian studied the property. Everything appeared consistent with an occupied residence. A professionally maintained yard. 2 registered vehicles in the driveway. Fresh deliveries. No signs of forced entry. Nothing that matched the tension now hanging over the conversation. His radio vibrated. Dispatch. He answered privately. Collins. Lisa Morgan's voice was noticeably lower than before. Sergeant, we've confirmed the administrative restrictions weren't an error. What kind of restrictions? I can't discuss them over the primary channel. Brian's expression changed slightly. Who authorized them? I don't have clearance to view that. Silence. Then Lisa added one more sentence. You should proceed carefully. The line disconnected. Brian looked back toward Monica. She hadn't moved. She simply watched him with patient eyes, as though she already understood the conversation he had just finished. Ethan noticed the change. What did dispatch say? Still reviewing. They've been reviewing for 10 minutes. Brian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked Monica a different question. Ma'am, is there anything you'd like to tell us that might help explain what's happening? She considered his words, then answered carefully. I believe your department already has everything it needs. Ethan sighed. There it is again. What? The mysterious answers. Monica looked directly at him. They're only mysterious because no one has verified the facts. A black sedan turned slowly onto Maple Ridge Drive before continuing past the house without stopping. Brian watched it disappear around the corner. Unmarked. Government plates. He frowned. Perhaps coincidence. Perhaps not. His instincts told him something larger was beginning to unfold. The dispatcher called again. This time there was no hesitation. Sergeant Collins. I'm here. The chief has been notified. Brian blinked. The chief? Yes. For this call? Yes, Sergeant. Ethan overheard enough to step closer. Why would the chief respond to a simple identification stop? Brian looked toward him. I don't know. But the truth was beginning to feel obvious. Nothing about this was simple anymore. As the morning breeze carried fallen leaves across the quiet sidewalk, Monica adjusted the strap of her briefcase. She finally spoke again. I appreciate that you're asking questions now, Sergeant. Brian met her eyes. And why is that? Because the right investigation, she answered softly, always begins when someone decides they might be wrong. Before either officer could respond, another vehicle turned onto the street. This one wasn't a patrol car. It belonged to Chief Robert Gaines himself. Some arrivals changed the conversation. Others reveal that the conversation was never what you thought it was. Chief Robert Gaines stepped out of his black department SUV with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to solving problems before they became headlines. He immediately noticed the unusual silence. 2 patrol vehicles. Neighbors watching from a respectful distance. Sergeant Brian Collins standing unusually still. And a woman on her own front porch who looked less like the subject of an investigation than someone patiently waiting for everyone else to catch up. Morning, the chief said evenly. Brian approached first. Chief, what do we have? Before Brian could answer, Ethan spoke confidently. Anonymous complaint. Possible trespassing. Subject refuses to provide identification. Chief Gaines turned toward Monica. Ma'am, I'm Chief Robert Gaines. Good morning, Chief. Her voice remained calm, professional, unhurried. There wasn't a trace of resentment in it. Only patience. The chief looked around the property. Nothing appeared unusual. The address matched a well-maintained residence. The vehicles in the driveway were properly registered. No visible evidence suggested criminal activity. He looked back at Ethan. What exactly led you to believe she doesn't live here? The caller reported she didn't belong. The caller knew her? I don't know. The caller saw a crime? No. The caller reported a victim? No. Chief Gaines let the silence answer the questions Ethan couldn't. Before anyone spoke again, the chief's phone vibrated. The screen displayed an internal government number. He answered immediately. Gaines. His expression changed almost at once. Yes. I'm at the location now. A pause. I understand. Another pause. I appreciate the notification. When the call ended, he remained silent for several seconds. Brian noticed it. Chief. Gaines looked toward Monica. She simply met his eyes with the same composed expression she had maintained since the first patrol car arrived. Almost as though she had expected that phone call. What was that? Ethan asked. The chief answered carefully. Federal coordination. Ethan frowned. For what? They didn't say. It wasn't entirely true. They had said just enough. An unidentified federal office had requested that no enforcement action be taken until additional personnel arrived. No explanation. Only instruction. Another black SUV entered Maple Ridge Drive. Then a second. Neither vehicle displayed emergency lights. Both carried discrete government license plates. They slowed as they approached the residence. The neighborhood grew even quieter. Several people lowered their phones. Others simply stared. Brian exchanged a glance with the chief. Neither spoke. The first SUV stopped across from the house. No one exited. Its engine continued idling. Ethan shifted uneasily. This is getting ridiculous. Monica looked toward the arriving vehicles, but showed no surprise. Instead, she adjusted her briefcase and calmly asked the chief one question. Has your department decided whether this is still a routine call? The chief didn't answer immediately, because he no longer believed it was. His radio crackled. Chief Gaines. He pressed the microphone. Go ahead. The responding federal representatives have arrived in the area. The dispatcher hesitated before finishing. They've requested that everyone remain exactly where they are. Ethan looked from the chief to the 2 silent government SUVs. What federal representatives? No one answered. The front door remained unopened. The neighborhood remained silent. And as the driver's door of the first black SUV slowly opened, every officer on the street realized this investigation had quietly become someone else's jurisdiction. Truth rarely announces itself. It simply walks into the room, and suddenly everyone remembers what they should have questioned. The driver's door of the first black SUV opened slowly. A man in a dark business suit stepped onto the pavement. There was no tactical gear, no visible weapon, and no dramatic display of authority. He carried only a leather portfolio and the quiet confidence of someone who had no need to introduce himself through force. A second suited official emerged from the vehicle behind him. The neighborhood had fallen completely silent. Chief Robert Gaines instinctively stepped forward. "Good morning." The first man extended a credential wallet just long enough for the chief to recognize the federal seal. "I'm Daniel Cross." Chief Gaines nodded respectfully. "Chief Robert Gaines." Cross glanced briefly toward Monica Harris before returning his attention to the chief. "Is everyone safe?" "Yes." "No one has been detained?" "No." "No force has been used?" "No." Cross gave a small nod, almost as though several concerns had just been removed from a checklist. "Good." Officer Ethan Walker finally stepped forward. "Can somebody explain what's going on?" Daniel looked at him calmly. In a moment, the second federal official quietly remained near the SUV, observing everything without interrupting. Cross turned back toward the chief. "We appreciate your cooperation." Chief Gaines lowered his voice. "My dispatcher indicated this address carries federal administrative restrictions." "It does." "May I ask why?" "You may." A brief silence followed. "You'll receive the explanation shortly." Ethan looked increasingly frustrated. "Chief, this started as a simple identification request." Daniel heard the comment. He slowly turned toward Ethan. "Did the resident decline to identify herself?" "Yes." Monica spoke before Ethan could continue. "I declined to provide identification because I had not been informed of any legal basis requiring it." Daniel nodded once. "I understand." He looked back toward Ethan. "Was she suspected of committing a crime?" Ethan hesitated. "We received a complaint." Daniel asked another question. "Did you independently observe criminal activity?" "No." "Did you verify property ownership before requesting identification?" "No." The questions remained calm. Professional. Each one seemed less like an accusation than a careful reconstruction of the morning. Chief Gaines quietly listened. Sergeant Collins did the same. Daniel finally walked toward the front porch. He stopped several feet from Monica. "Good morning, counselor." She smiled politely. "Good morning, Mr. Cross." That single exchange changed everything. Ethan noticed it immediately. "You know each other?" Daniel answered without looking away from Monica. "Professionally." He then turned toward the assembled officers. "I believe it's time to resolve everyone's uncertainty." The second federal official handed him a sealed folder. Daniel opened it carefully. Inside rested several official documents bearing the seal of the United States Department of Justice. He removed the first page and addressed Chief Gaines. "For the record, the homeowner has fully cooperated with every lawful request made this morning." Chief Gaines nodded. Daniel continued. "And for the record," he looked directly at Ethan Walker, "the individual standing before you is not merely the resident of this property." He paused. The quiet street seemed to stop breathing. Neighbors leaned forward. Even the birds had fallen silent. Daniel closed the folder with deliberate care. "She serves as the United States Attorney for this federal district." For the first time that morning, Officer Ethan Walker had no words at all. Respect cannot be demanded by a badge. It is earned by the choices made while wearing one. The words settled over Maple Ridge Drive like a sudden change in weather. No one spoke. Officer Ethan Walker stared at Monica Harris as though he had heard the sentence, but could not quite understand it. United States Attorney. The title echoed inside his mind. He looked at her again. The same woman he had repeatedly questioned. The same woman he had assumed did not belong. Nothing about her had changed. Only what he believed about her. Chief Robert Gaines took a slow breath. "Ms. Harris." Monica gently interrupted him. "Chief, Monica is fine." There was no anger in her voice. No triumph. Only quiet professionalism. Daniel Cross closed the folder and addressed everyone present. "For clarity, today's response is not about rank." He glanced toward Ethan. "It's about procedure." The statement carried more weight than if it had been spoken loudly. Ethan finally found his voice. I had no way of knowing who she was." Daniel nodded. "You're correct." Nobody argued. Then he continued. "You were never expected to know her position." Ethan looked relieved for only a moment. Daniel finished the sentence. "You were expected to know your standards." The relief disappeared. Silence returned. Sergeant Brian Collins lowered his eyes briefly. He already understood where the conversation was leading. Daniel continued speaking with the calm precision of someone explaining policy rather than assigning blame. The identity of the homeowner is not the issue. He looked around the quiet street. The question is whether the same encounter would have occurred if different assumptions had been made before the investigation began. No one answered. Because everyone understood the question, Chief Gaines turned toward Ethan. What evidence did you independently verify before requesting identification? Ethan hesitated. The complaint. The complaint was information. The chief's tone remained controlled. What evidence did you verify? Ethan searched for an answer. None came. Across the street, several neighbors quietly exchanged glances. They had watched the encounter from the beginning. What had first appeared to be routine now looked very different. Monica finally spoke. I don't expect perfection. Every eye turned toward her. I've worked with law enforcement for many years. She looked first at Sergeant Collins, then at the chief, finally at Ethan. I know officers make difficult decisions every day. She paused. What concerns me is when conclusions arrive before the questions do. Her words were gentle, yet they landed with unmistakable force. Daniel nodded in agreement. That's why federal civil rights standards emphasize objective facts. Chief Gaines slowly removed his department cap. He looked directly at Monica. On behalf of this department, I apologize for how this encounter began. Monica accepted the apology with a quiet nod. Thank you, Chief. Then she added something that surprised everyone. I hope today's lesson protects someone you've never met. Chief Gaines understood immediately. This morning had become larger than one officer, larger than one complaint, larger than one neighborhood. It had become a reminder that every investigation begins with a choice, to confirm an assumption or to discover the truth. As Daniel Cross carefully returned the federal documents to the folder, another government vehicle turned onto Maple Ridge Drive. Its arrival was expected. Its purpose was not, because the next phase would no longer focus on what had happened at the front door. It would focus on why it had happened in the first place. Justice does not end when the truth is revealed. That is only the moment accountability begins. The third government vehicle stopped quietly behind the others. Its arrival carried none of the urgency that usually accompanied flashing lights. Instead, it brought something more powerful. Documentation. 3 officials stepped out carrying sealed cases and tablet computers. Their expressions were calm, professional, almost routine. Daniel Cross greeted them with a simple nod. They're ready. One of the officials approached Chief Robert Gaines. We'll need copies of the body camera recordings. The chief answered immediately. You'll have full access. We'll also require the dispatch audio. Already preserved. Sergeant Brian Collins quietly added. Every radio transmission has been logged. The official nodded appreciatively. Thank you, Sergeant. Officer Ethan Walker remained motionless. Only minutes earlier, he had believed he was leading an ordinary field investigation. Now investigators were documenting his investigation instead. He watched as one official photographed the scene. Not the people, but the positions of the patrol vehicles, the front porch, the sidewalk, and the distance between. Everyone involved. Every detail mattered. Not because someone important had been standing there. Because every citizen deserved the same careful review. Monica Harris remained composed. She had not asked anyone to be disciplined. She had not demanded anyone lose a job. She simply answered every question directed toward her. When did the encounter begin? She provided the exact time. Were you physically prevented from entering your residence? No. Were you informed of a specific offense? No. Were you treated respectfully throughout the interaction? Monica paused before answering. The language remained professional. Another brief pause. But the assumptions did not. The investigator wrote the sentence down word for word. Daniel looked toward Ethan. Officer Walker. Ethan straightened instinctively. Yes, sir. We'd like your account. For several seconds, he searched for the right words. I responded to a complaint. You did. I believed I was acting appropriately. Daniel nodded. I believe you did. Ethan looked surprised. Daniel continued. The purpose of an investigation isn't to determine whether someone believed they were right. He closed his notebook. It's to determine whether established standards were followed. Chief Gaines quietly lowered his eyes. That sentence applied to every badge in the department. Not only Ethan's. Across the street, the neighbors had stopped whispering. The excitement had faded. What remained was something quieter. Reflection. One elderly man removed his cap as he watched. A young mother gently led her daughter back toward their front yard. Life on Maple Ridge Drive slowly resumed. But no one would remember the morning the same way. Monica finally picked up her briefcase. She looked toward Chief Gaines. "I appreciate your cooperation." The chief nodded respectfully. "You've shown us more professionalism today than we showed you at the beginning." She offered a small smile. Professionalism isn't tested when everything goes well. She looked briefly toward Ethan. It's tested when someone else makes a mistake. The words struck him harder than any accusation could have. She had every opportunity to humiliate him. Instead, she had chosen dignity. As the federal officials sealed the final evidence envelope and prepared to leave, Daniel Cross looked once more at the assembled officers. "This review isn't intended to punish assumptions." He paused. "It's intended to prevent them from becoming policy." The quiet street seemed unchanged. The same houses, the same trees, the same front porch. Yet everyone standing there understood that by the end of the day, one investigation would be closed, and another would only be beginning. The greatest measure of justice is not how it protects the powerful. It is how faithfully it protects the ordinary. Several weeks later, the morning on Maple Ridge Drive had become a closed case. But it had not become a forgotten one. Inside the police academy's main training auditorium, nearly 100 recruits sat quietly beneath the department seal. The lights dimmed. A projector illuminated the front wall. No names appeared on the screen. No faces. Only a single sentence. "A lawful authority begins with lawful assumptions." Chief Robert Gaines stood beside the podium. He looked across the room before speaking. "Today isn't about embarrassment." The recruits listened carefully. "It isn't about punishment." He paused. "It's about learning from a moment when procedure almost gave way to presumption." The first body camera footage began to play. The video showed only ordinary moments. A patrol car arriving. An officer walking toward a front porch. A homeowner standing calmly at her own front door. Nothing dramatic. Nothing violent. Yet the room remained completely silent. Because every recruit understood how easily the situation could have happened to anyone wearing the uniform. Chief Gaines stopped the recording. What was the first verified fact? No one answered immediately. Finally, one recruit raised her hand. The officer had received a complaint. The chief nodded. "That's information." He looked around the room. What was the first verified fact? Another recruit answered. There wasn't one. Correct. The room grew even quieter. A complaint had begun the encounter. But verification had arrived much later. Chief Gaines advanced to the final slide. Across the screen appeared another sentence. Evidence must always arrive before conclusions. In another part of the city, Monica Harris walked into the federal courthouse carrying the same leather briefcase she had held that morning. Employees greeted her warmly. She greeted every one of them in return. The incident had never become a public spectacle. She had requested that it remain a teaching opportunity whenever possible. Not because accountability mattered less, but because better policing mattered more. Daniel Cross met her outside the courtroom. The department accepted every recommendation. Monica smiled faintly. "I hope they would. They're revising field contact training." She nodded. "Good." Daniel looked at her. "You could have handled this very differently." "I know. You chose restraint." She answered after a brief silence. "Justice isn't measured by how many careers it ends." She looked toward the courtroom doors. "It's measured by how many mistakes it prevents from happening again." Later that afternoon, Officer Ethan Walker removed his patrol vehicle from the station garage. He paused before pulling onto the street. For several moments, he watched people walking along the sidewalk. Parents, students, workers, neighbors, strangers. He realized something he had never fully understood before. Every person he encountered carried a story he could not see. Every encounter offered a choice: to assume or to understand. As the patrol car slowly disappeared into the afternoon traffic, the lesson from Maple Ridge Drive remained far behind him, yet closer than ever. Because Monica Harris had never needed to prove she deserved respect. The badge had needed to prove that it remembered why respect was owed in the first place. He thought he was enforcing the law. But on that quiet front porch, the law had quietly reminded everyone, including itself, what justice was always meant to look like.